I'm speaking to you all from Texas, where it's now almost 10:30 at night. So I'm from here. I'd say good evening. For those of you in Hawaii, I'll just say aloha. Uh, this is going to be a kind of an interesting session because what my friend Jürgen told me it was going to be about was kind of how to merchandise and put goods on display in a place like an ABC store. And as I listened to everybody speak, I realized there's nobody here from an ABC store. And basically, none of you are doing that type of merchandising. So I created a speech for all of you about the wrong subject. But we do have it, and if anybody's interested, I'll send that. So instead, I'm going to speak to you a little bit about the current situation in tourism, and then some of the ideas and concepts that we can use maybe to begin to rebuild or show resilience. First of all, so I'm going to divide this into three areas. The first part of it is going to be sections dealing with our current situation in the United States, in the world, possibly Hawaii. Obviously I'm not in Hawaii, but I have spent a lot of time in your state. I've spoken at 2 or 3 governors' conferences. I gave a course at the University of Hawaii in Manoa. And at one point I could do a fairly primitive but simple conversation in Hawaiian. So I was starting to learn Hawaiian grammar. So while I'm not an expert in living there the way you all are, I have spent enough time to feel comfortable being in Hawaii. For those of you who don't know me, I've worked for the last almost 40 years in areas dealing with especially tourism security. I got to be part of the team that dealt with the security for 3 Olympics, for the World Cup in Brazil. Prior to the current situation, which means prior to February, I was in a different country almost every week. Since February, my travel has gone from my house to the Walmart, which is open at 6 a.m. in the morning, where you're able to get, and they only take 10 people at a time. It's not my favorite necessarily place to shop, but it's clean and safe. So like all of your lives, my life has also been restricted. Texas is a little bit ahead of the curve. We have many more hospital beds than we need, thank God. We have lots of open, we could easily handle almost any problem with COVID-19. I do teach at our medical school, and therefore I'm going to combine tourism with also the issues of medicine. And we're now opening up. So we're about, if on 100% means you're totally open, we're probably about 35% open. By the end of the month, we should be about 60 or 70% open, which means that there's lots of new opportunities developing. So first, just a few words about tourism. The tourism industry was, and I use that as a preterite tense, probably the world's strongest peacetime industry. Well, no one knows exactly how much money tourism produces because it's a composite industry, and therefore it depends upon which parts of which components you want to add to it or not. But it produced someplace between $3 and $9 trillion a year. Now that's on the worldwide level. And again, understand that's a guesstimate because if I build a road to an airport, is that a tourism expense or is that a building expense? Is an airline part of the tourism industry or not? So it's how you measure it is going to give you the actual numbers. But no matter how you want to look at it, we went from the probably largest peacetime industry in the world to an industry which by the end of February or the beginning of March, we really began to question, would tourism even continue to exist? And I think there's no one who's hearing me who at one moment or not, one point in the last 8 or 9 weeks has not said, wow, will this whole thing come to a complete collapse? I don't think it will, and I want to emphasize that. But certainly there was a fear that touched on all of us at one point. And thinking about this, I thought about the fact that to a great extent, if those of you who've studied psychology may be familiar with Kubler-Ross and her paradigm for what happens when there's a death. And on some level, that is somewhat similar to the way many of us have come to deal with the economics in the last 8 or 9 weeks. I think all of us have gone through, in the beginning, denial. It'll be over just instantaneously. And then we realized that wasn't right. We were told, and we had denial on every level. It's every single politician, and I want to make this really clear. I'm not going to speak politically, but I am going to speak factually. Almost every single politician misjudged the situation coming with COVID. Almost every single doctor misjudged it. Part of that is because we got wrong information coming through the line, and garbage in gives you garbage out. So even on that, I'm going to take a side. I'm hearing all sorts of strange things coming out of people. It's going to be okay once we have a vaccine. Ladies and gentlemen, that's just not a true statement. That's the only way I can say it. If I look, the COVID-19 is very similar in its makeup to influenza, to the cold, to SARS, to a whole series of other corona-type viruses. Every year, we are still suffering from the Spanish flu. So how do I know you all have the Spanish flu? Because you're born. And every single person who's born, who's walking today in the 21st century, has carried some part of that Spanish flu with him. That's one of the reasons why we have to have a vaccine every year. And those vaccines are someplace between 40, which is a very bad year, and 60% effective. That means, in simple terms, if you have 100 people and you gave them all a vaccine, 60 of them would be protected, but 40 would not be. Now, the flu is less contagious than COVID-19, but COVID-19 is operating just like medically, like any of the other types of corona-type viruses. It's mutating. Probably now we would need to have 3 or 4 types of vaccines. And we can expect many different types of mutations along the way. So this is something we're going to have to learn to live with. I live in Texas. We have an issue many years ago of fire ants. And people said, well, maybe they'll go away. They didn't go away. Instead, we had to learn to come to peace with them. And in the same way, we're going to have to come to peace one way or the other with COVID-19. Then I think we went through a stage of anger. We were mad at everybody. Then we started kind of bargaining. You know, if we do this, and many of us are in that stage right now, if I only do this, if I change the way I put seatings in or whatever, it's all going to be better. Well, it's going to help, but it's not going to be better. We've gone through a period of depression. You know, everything's going to collapse. No, everything is not going to collapse. People are very resilient, and I'll talk about that in a second. And now I think we're coming beyond acceptance. We're coming to a 6th stage, which we might call resilience. And so one of the things that we're now working on around the world is, right now we're calling it COVID. Eventually it will come with other names, but we might call it illness resistance zones or COVID resilience zones. The reason we're using the word resilience is, one, there is no such thing as 100% safety or security. I work in risk management. I cannot guarantee any person here that you are 100% safe under any situation. We all live with risk. That's just a reality. Now, we can lower the risk. We don't tend to speak in risk management in positives. This is the one time, and I'm a pretty up person, but we speak in negatives. In other words, I cannot guarantee you will not get COVID. What we can do is lower the chances that you will get ill. And that's and so our job, just like in safety, in security, in counterterrorism, is we cannot totally eliminate the risk, but we try our best to limit it and to keep it under control. The same way your doctor works with you at home and will say to you, okay, please keep your weight under control, try to eat less meat and more fish or vegetables, move to a Mediterranean diet, try not to smoke, try not to drink too much. Those are things that you could still live very well doing, making all those mistakes, but they're trying to come up with ways that the great majority of people will be able to come out better. And that's what we have to do in this also. So one of the things we're going to look at is how do we create resilience? And that means two areas. The first area is dealing head on with the crisis. And that means creating guidelines, protocols for every part of the tourism system. And remember, the tourism system, again, is very similar to a human body. If one part of the human body goes down, the whole system collapses. In the same way, we're now facing the issue in tourism that if one part doesn't work, none of the other parts work. So yes, I can assure that the cabin of an airline might be in very good shape. But if the person got COVID on a taxi cab going to the terminal, or the terminal is not cleaned on a regular basis, then you know what? That airline's disinfectant is good, but it's not going to stop the system. So in other words, we have got to create now protocols from the very beginning of when a person leaves his or her home to the time that person arrives back at his or her home. That means the first thing we're going to have to think about is how much tourism do we want? Now, I'm in the world of tourism, and as are all of you. But we may now be facing the issue. If you remember in January, we were complaining about over-tourism. I gave an article not that long ago for one of the Honolulu papers, and I said to the reporter, to Allison, if you started just arresting people on the streets, that doesn't seem to me to be very much an aloha spirit. The whole concept of aloha, of welcoming and caring and love and reciprocity are all intertwined with what Hawaii stands for. And then to destroy that spirit is kind of, from at least an outsider's viewpoint, destroying the soul of what people think of as Hawaii. So that means Hawaii is going to have to make a decision, and certainly those of us who are outsiders cannot make that decision. How much tourism do you want? What type of tourism do you want? How do you want to control that tourism? In a sense, it's not a good opportunity, but it's an opportunity where Hawaii is going to be able to think through and really fight with itself. Is it happy with the state of tourism as it knows it? Or does it want a very different state of tourism? And that's a decision only I think the people of Hawaii can make. That means we're going to have some challenges. If we're going to have airplanes that are 50% full, or restaurants, or in Texas right now, you're only allowed 25% of the restaurant to be open. If we're going to do that, will restaurants have to raise prices? Hotels traditionally have needed to maintain at least a 60% occupancy in order to stay above water. If we tell a hotel it can only have 30% occupancy, how do they maintain employees? How do they maintain paying for electricity? How do they maintain water resources? How do they offer, or will the prices be so expensive that only the very rich can come? So one of the issues will be, are we going to maintain right now, which was democratic tourism, in the sense that we were trying to make it open to everyone, or are we going to have to move to elitist tourism? I'm not giving you an answer, I'm asking a question. And I think each community will have to think that part through very carefully. But that creates secondary consequences. Some of those consequences are going to be, if you move to an elitist form of tourism, what is that going to do to your employment situation? And in Hawaii, your two biggest industries are one, state government, which is a bad basis to build an economy, and two, tourism. Can you diversify so that you're going to be able to not be dependent on governments? Make no money, they just recirculate money. The tourism industry did bring in new money, but if you only bring in a certain number of tourists, will you need the same number of employees? What will that do to the need for electricity? What will that do to state revenue? What will that do to city sales taxes? Certainly, that's an issue that every state and city around the country and to a great extent the world is thinking through how will they go beyond that. So we're going to have to come up with some really new ideas. And that's the reason we're using the term of the idea of having not corona-free zones, because there is no such thing as that, or COVID-free zones, because no one can guarantee that, but rather resilience. One is trying to get the best protocols possible once a community decides what type of tourism it wants. The second part of it is then bouncing back. And that means having a goal, deciding where you want to go, and working together to get to somewhat that type of goal. And that's going to be the resilience part of it. That means that you have to have hope, because you cannot have resilience without having a certain amount of hope. And that means you have to have hope in yourselves, hope in your state, and hope in the community to where you're going to go. Now, those are going to be challenges that we're going to have to look about. There are some, right now, I think many of us kind of feel like we were, remember the childhood nursery rhyme, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty Dumpty together again. On some level, when we closed down the world, the tourism industry was Humpty Dumpty. And if we cannot, and we may not be able to put Humpty Dumpty back together again in quite the same way that it was prior. So the idea we're going to go back to the old normal is not realistic. It's changed. It may be similar or may be different, but it's going to have to be a very different, we're going to have to come up with new ideas and new situations. I went to for the first time in 3 months, to the barbershop today. I wanted to get a haircut. It wasn't the same type of haircut. Before they would let me in, I had to prove I had a face mask on. I had to have my temperature taken. There was a temperature range. It couldn't be too low or it couldn't be too high. You were only allowed one person into the barbershop. Therefore, there used to be 10 salonists, people working, cutting hair in the barbershop, or whatever the proper word for it is now. There was only one woman working, because if you only have one person at a time, that means you cannot employ 10 people. You only can employ one person. So they've cut back radically. My whole haircut experience was very different than the last time I went prior to the shutdowns and the close. I think we're going to see that throughout all of tourism. So one, I think it's really important that we express a positive sense of hope. Tourism is based on positivity. So we have to make sure that we're upbeat and we express that to our clients. If you're not positive, your clients will certainly not be. Secondly, I think it's really important that we begin to start experimenting with out-of-the-box ideas. Try, if it seems bizarre, if it seems strange, try it. The more innovative and creative ideas that you can come up with, the better it's going to be, because people are going to appreciate the creativity and the innovation. And it may not work. You may have to change it 3 or 4 times. But that's already a form of marketing and salesmanship showing that you are making those changes. 3, we got to get beyond bureaucracy. I know that when I was honored to do with the Hawaii Tourism Authority about 10 years ago, I did a full tourism security assessment of the state of Hawaii. One of the biggest issues that I saw was the bureaucracy was constantly getting in my way. And we are going to have to, not only do this private business need to change, but governments are going to have to change. They're going to have less money coming in. There's going to be less taxes. You cannot tax people to death. And so they're going to have to be leaner, and they're going to have, and on some level, even though right now it feels like our lives are being controlled by somebody, whoever that person is, but eventually they're going to have to give us a lot more freedom. Because without freedom, there will not be the innovation that's going to be needed in order to do that. That means we in the tourism industry have to participate. For too long, the tourism industry has not gotten involved with local governments. We don't show up at town hall meetings. We don't often testify. We pay a lobbyist at a state government situation. We don't necessarily meet with governors as much as we should be meeting. We got to make it clear that if we're not going to take care of ourselves, nobody else is, and that tourism not only is bringing money into any particular state, but any other form of economic development begins with tourism. So if I'm coming to set up anything, a factory, a new, whatever it happens to be, I'm going to come on an exploratory visit. And tourism is not part of economic development. We have to remember tourism is economic development. Without good hotels, without restaurants, without a sense of people caring, without good customer service, no one is ever going to move a business or move themselves to a different place. So tourism is not economic development. It's not a part of it. It is economic development, and I cannot emphasize that enough. I think I mentioned that the tourism industry is somewhat like a human body. If any one part goes down, the whole system goes down. And therefore, it's going to be really important. I think there's one person here from the Hawaiian Tourism Authority, from HTWA. The need for helping each other is going to be essential. We cannot just compete with each other. We actually have to make sure that we cannot say, it's my job just to fly the plane. I could care less what happens when you get there. No. Now it's going to take a place that we're going to have to present total packages where people are going to be able to see things. Now, for a while, I don't think we're going to see long haul, and that's going to be a real issue for Hawaii. I noticed today that there was a lot of chatter that airplanes are bad for the environment, and therefore they should stop airplanes. Well, you know what? If we stop airplanes, you guys go out of business, because Hawaii cannot exist. You're not going to row a canoe from Japan or from San Francisco to get to Hawaii. So we're going to have to create some sort of compromises and ways to getting things to work. But you're not going to have a lot of short haul visits because there's no short haul. I guess you can go from one island to the other. But regional or local visits, which is how most places are going to begin, is very different from in Texas. In Texas, I can drive 200, 300, 400, 500, 1,200 miles and still be in Texas. You can't drive from one island in Hawaii to another. So therefore, that's going to be, you can encourage state tourism. And I love the fact that in Hawaii, every island is different and every island has its own special flavor. And you may be able to encourage people from one island to the other. But your population is very small. The total population of Hawaii, if I'm not mistaken, is under 1.5 million people. And therefore, without people coming in from abroad means any place outside of Hawaii, it's going to be very hard to maintain a local tourism infrastructure with that level of that small population demographic, and the fact that you have the highest unemployment in the United States today. And if I'm not mistaken, the figures that I've been given were that unemployment is now running about 50%. That's 1 out of every 2. So therefore, there's going to have to be some really major new concepts for Hawaii. And you're going to have to make some compromises because you can't make it any other way. One of the things you have to do is you cannot take care of others if you don't take care of yourself. And one of the things I see often in people in the tourism industry, including me, so I'm not, blaming anybody else for something that I don't, we work long hours. We tend to not take a day off. We tend to not eat well. We tend to eat on the rush. Those things impact us. And if we're going to take care of others, and remember the word hospitality is related to the word hospital. They both come from the Latin word meaning to take care of. Hospitals take care of your body. Hospitality, if it's done right, should take care of your soul. And in the non-religious sense, but it's just the poetic sense of the word soul. That means we're going to have to take care of ourselves on a personal level, on the micro level, the mezzo level, and the macro level, on all three levels before we're going to be able to take care of others. We need to provide really up-to-date information. And that's part of the issue. I think the tourism industry is going to have to demand that we get beyond politicizing the news. We need to know what the rules are, what the regulations are. We cannot give people misinformation. And I'm not talking about presidential elections or structure, but you do have to know, can you go on the street or not? What are the laws dealing with quarantine? What are the laws dealing with restaurants being open or not? Those laws or regulations are changing almost every day. In every state, they're different. And so that means that when tourists do come back, we got to make sure they are up to date, we're up to date, and we're giving information that's really accurate. We're going to have to remember that we have to think on the macro, in other words, the big picture, but we're going to have to work on the micro, on the individual. And that means that tourism is going to be different, not only from state to state in the United States, but if you're talking about Hawaii, from island to island, almost from community to community. In Texas, which is a very different world, I like to tell people I can travel 200 miles and be in the same place. You can't do that in Hawaii. If I go 200 miles in Texas, the big difference is that the Walmart or the Dairy Queen is on the right side of the street versus the left side of the street. But other than that, I wouldn't necessarily know that I traveled 200 miles. You have a great advantage there. Each part of Hawaii is different. You're going to need to celebrate those differences. And while, yes, there's the macro Hawaiian culture, there's also the individuality that you bring by both local or not. One of my favorite parts about being in the state of Hawaii is when I'm on different islands, I feel I'm in a different world in each place. They're all paradise, but they're different forms of paradise. So that's also a very important area. We're going to have to start figuring out new and creative ways of making people feel secure. What happens if I go to Hawaii and I get sick? Suppose I don't speak English very well. Suppose, how quickly will I be able to find a pharmacy? I remember many years ago, it's better now, I will tell you, but many years ago, I was on the main street of Waikiki, and I stopped somebody and I asked them, I just said, do you want to see how they would react? I said, I have a headache. Is there a place I can get an aspirin? And they kind of looked at me and said, no, not really. And we were in front of an ABC store. And it's not hard to find an ABC store in every street corner in Hawaii. So what I really got from that is that person just didn't care. That was not very, that was not aloha, to say the least. You have a wonderful concept within Aloha because it truly brings out and makes you special. Tourism is the celebration of the unique. Probably only 2 or 3 states really have unique cultures that are part of that state. Texans take great pride in their being like, not being like everybody else. One of the state mottos here is Texas, we're like a whole other country. Hawaii is a place that has, you have the Hawaiian language, Hawaiian culture, Hawaiian dance, Hawaiian flowers, Hawaiian leis. Hawaii is its own other country, just like Texas is. That makes you a special place. So as you slowly open up, you're going to have to do it. How quickly will we open? That's really going to be a decision on some part on your government and on the tourism industry there. I can't, I don't know your governor and I don't know what he or she is thinking. Certainly in Texas, we're working very quickly to open up as fast as we can. That's safe. I'm amazed at how clearly here people are following rules while still opening. So I walk every morning at 6 a.m. and people clearly, and there's all sorts of people, it's a college town, but if one person is on the sidewalk, the other person immediately moves into the road or moves onto the grass. But everyone seems to know, let's follow those 2 meters, 6 feet apart. That means I don't need a government to tell me to do that because we've already figured it out. The shops here that are open are working really hard. Now, how quickly Hawaii will choose to do that? On some level, I think how much confidence do you have in yourselves? But I think if you promote yourselves and are confident in yourselves, then you're going to be able to open up because you are truly a wonderful tourism destination. And I know that I'm very lucky to have had the opportunity to be with you all. So, Jürgen, I'm not going to talk about where to put merchandise and stuff because that doesn't seem to be the audience. So, but we can send that out to you. But I was told to speak for about half an hour, which is what I did. And now I'm going to open it up. If anyone has a question or you want to get mad at me or fight with me, that's okay. You know, I'd be more than happy to do that. So I guess if somebody, you're supposed to raise your hand or do something and
click the blue button.
I think David Lowe is trying to say something. Is that correct, David? No, you're just moving your camera.
All right, anyone, anything to say? Just click on the blue button. Any questions? Well, it looks like you shocked everyone, Peter.
Oh, well, that was my goal. I did send out, if I send it, yes?
I'll ask a question. So,
This is my friend Peter.
I understand is tourism is like 10% of the world's GDP.
Yes.
Tourism is 10% of what the money roll around. Seems to me like Hawaii has one chance. We're completely shut down. We have one chance to reinvent ourselves and do it right. We know we made mistakes along the way. We became the more is better, but beds, heads in the beds and seats in the whatever it was. We need to, I want to ask you, what should we shoot for? Tahiti in a year has 200 and something thousand tourists. We have that in one day in Hawaii.
Yeah.
What should we be striving for? What kind of tourism should we have a chance? What kind of tourism should we look for in the future that would make sense to us and make a better product looking down the road? That's my question. Thank you.
That's a really good question. And I think to some level, it's going to depend on what the people of Hawaii want. Right now, we were once upon a time sort of a luxury destination. Then you changed your direction from what I could see. And you kind of became, especially with low-cost airlines, became a place that was almost like a weekend destination, maybe for a 7-day weekend destination. But it kind of lost its pizzazz. And I would hope, but it's not for me to say because I don't live there and I don't pay taxes there, that you think through how to create a situation where you take care of what you have, which is especially your ecology and your culture. And I count culture as part of the ecology, and yet are able to create it so that people can enjoy it without destroying the beauty of what Hawaii is. You don't want to just be another beach resort. And, sometimes when I'm in places like Waikiki, I really wonder, I'm sort of losing the Hawaiian spirit of what makes Hawaii special. So again, I'm not a Hawaiian. This is something you all have to make a decision on. And I really shouldn't be lecturing. I should be listening. But I would certainly start with the Hawaiian spirit and the whole concept of aloha and make that really a place that people remember and not a place, oh yeah, was I in Hawaii or Miami or Tel Aviv or Hong Kong? In other words, let the beauty of your culture shine forth.
Okay. Anyone else? Any questions? It's free.
Great. Hey, this is Tyler over there from Delta Vacations.
Tyler.
Question for you. We definitely have to publish protocols, as you mentioned. The question is more when you have, some protocols I've seen are 48 pages on cleaning and things like that. Is it better to maybe go generic and accurate versus trying to keep up with all the constant changes of every little thing that's going to happen today but won't happen 2 weeks from now because we don't need it anymore.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The latter is preferable. The more complicated you make protocols, the less chance they are that they're going to be observed. So keep them, you remember the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid? That also goes for protocols. I'm working with protocols right now for a number of places around the world. And one of the things I'm saying to them is, you want the protocols to fit to the location. So for example, I'm working with, tomorrow, we're going to be doing this again in Spanish. And one of the people who will be speaking with me is from Ecuador. There's a big difference between Guayaquil on the coast and the Ecuadorian mountains and the jungle regions. So I can't make one size fits all, but I can use the methodology that if you can't understand it in 5 minutes and you can't remember it, it's too complicated.
Got it. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We got Scott raised a hand. Scott, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Scott.
Okay. This is aloha, especially to Peter.
Thank you.
I got to know Peter through the years. I was lucky enough to get to meet with him. Oh, I don't know, a dozen times, I guess, through the years. So I guess what I'm trying to come up with is, I don't really know what to say. This is such an astounding change.
Yes.
Circumstances for all of us, of course. But here we are, and my God, look at the challenges we have. I don't have all the answers, but I do know that through the years, I watched some very, very stupid decisions made about how Hawaii was going with tourism. And you may all certainly remember that it wasn't just a few months ago. We were all mutually involved in trying to stop over tourism.
Right.
Well, that's over. And so what are all these folks that have lived so fat off the pig gonna do now, I guess, is my question. What are they gonna do now? But anyway, I can't answer that, but that's the question we've all got to deal with. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. First of all, mahalo. I think really you're bringing up a more important issue. It's not stated, but it's there. And that is, this is tragically an opportunity because it's a necessity. And I think I mentioned all crises have both danger and opportunity. So we have to decide which way we want to go. Don't make any fast decisions. Now, politicians of all parties want to show instant, I've solved the problem, I have all the answers. The bottom line is none of us have all the answers. It's important to take the time to think things through. Better to spend an extra month or two coming up with really clear research and data-driven ideas than it is just to go crazy and come up with anything just to come up with anything. There's a difference between public policy and a particular business. Businesses, the smaller you are, the more flexible you can be. But when you're getting to the level of a city or state, then you really have to be careful because you're pulling everybody along with you. And what you do, the mistakes you make, sometimes cannot be undone. So let's think it through. Let's talk to each other. Let's try to tone down the tremendous anger that we feel in many different places. And, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth because we're supposed to listen twice as much as we talk. And I think that's a good beginning.
We have Johnson Choi. Johnson, go
I
ahead.
have a question. You mentioned that Hawaii is unique in the sense that everyone has to take a plane to come to Hawaii, and you cannot just drive to Hawaii. How, well, it's a positive and negative way. How do you ensure people that come in from the mainland or from Asia that they are not positive on COVID-19 before they enter the state of Hawaii? So that will give Hawaii some assurance that, because there's a lot of cities in Asia that you have to go in there, you have to take a 14-day quarantine. But if there's a system in Hawaii that we can adopt, that they are pre-screened, that they are COVID-19 negative, that means they can come to Hawaii without going through the quarantine in case the COVID-19 come back again in the wintertime.
Well, first of all, I don't think it's going to go away, COVID. I think we're going to go, it's going to be like big waves and small waves. So we know that it's a misconception that heat will just totally destroy it. You have COVID-19 in Singapore. You have COVID-19 in Guayaquil, which is right on the equator. You have COVID-19 in Hawaii, which is not necessarily a cold place, though I know you can go skiing in the Big Island, but that's the one exception to that rule. So I think you're going to see stronger and lesser waves, but don't expect it to go away. Secondly, I think we have to come up to the reality that within a year or two, probably all of us, or 80% of the population, is going to, were they given a test, they would show some positivity. So the issue is not going to be, do you have COVID or not? It's going to be, do you have the antibodies not to get re-sick? Now, currently, we do not, I cannot guarantee you that someone doesn't have COVID, because half of the cases are asymptomatic. And secondly, even taking your temperature, it often does not show or manifest itself in a temperature for 5 to 7 days. Therefore, I could have absolutely no signs of having COVID-19. I could get on a plane. I could be well for the first 5 days I'm in Hawaii. And day 6 or 7, it manifests itself. And there's no way at the current state of medical knowledge that we could guarantee you that that could not happen. So the only thing you could do is say anyone who wants to come to Hawaii is going to have to go through 14 days of quarantine, and then they'll be let out on the streets. People may not want to do that. Now, you might want to pay for somebody to stay in quarantine in Los Angeles or San Francisco and then get on the plane. But one way or the other, we don't have that yet. So here are the realities. One, we cannot totally test and give you 100% guarantee. It doesn't exist. Two, when we have a vaccine, if it gets to the level of 60%, we're going to be very lucky. Three, what we do need to do is come up with medications, and that's being worked on in a number of countries. Israel and Germany are working very hard, not on developing a vaccine, but instead on developing medications that if you have it, it'll be like, I have a headache, you know, we'll be able to bring it down very quickly. And that will take a lot of the fear out of it, because it won't be a death sentence. It will be, all right, I'm uncomfortable for a day. But trying to make 100% not existing is like saying, you may not come to Hawaii if you have a cold. And remember, there's not that much biological difference between a cold and COVID-19. One just got better publicity. So we have to realize you cannot prevent everyone coming in with some form of a coronavirus. It isn't going to take place. What we've got to do is come up with medical realities, and then we have to decide what is the level of risk. Now, if the risk level that Hawaii wants to take is 100%, no one has it, I think you need to shut down your tourism industry. Just go out of business. If so, therefore, and I don't think many people are going to accept that, and I think the amount of unemployment would be so great and the economic suffering would be so tremendous that that would be an unacceptable alternative. So the only thing that we can do is say, okay, what is an acceptable risk that we can work with? And that's something, as we develop more medicines, and we'll be able to lower that risk level and say, okay, we can live with that risk. Remember, you have other types of risks. You have a risk when you get into a car. Many people die of traffic accidents. Many people die of diabetes or a whole series of illnesses. Cancer is a major killer. Heart disease is a major killer, but we live with that type of risk because we have no alternative. We're going to have to learn to live with the risks of COVID-19 and yet come up with manageable ways of being able to handle it. What scared people the most was 2 months ago, we had no medication that would work. We're now developing medications. The Israelis have made tremendous progress in medications. The Germans and the Israelis are working very hard together to be able to come up with those types of things. And that may be really the bottom line in the salvation. I don't know, but that appears to be at least a doable process.
Thank you, Peter. Anyone else? All right, I think we had more than a good hour.
Yes, I'm tired. I'm going to go to sleep. It's 11:13 at night.
And
Thomas, can I make us say something?
Sure.
Sorry to interrupt, but I want to thank Dr. Tarlow for speaking to this group. We usually have a group of about 12, 15 people that meet the second Wednesday of every month downtown Honolulu. We've had as many as 39 people here tonight on this Zoom meeting. So I want to thank everybody who was here tonight and participating in it. That's great, as well as you, Dr. Tarlow. So thank you for speaking to us.
Thank you. Next time I come to Hawaii, we can all go out for dinner. When the restaurants are open.
And we look forward to that. And Thomas, I want to thank you for coordinating this tonight as well. That was a bit of work, and you did a great job. I can't believe how many people we have. So it's wonderful. I look forward to next month as well. I do want to comment briefly. There's a number of us here on this Zoom meeting who are in the wholesale distribution business, and more specifically in the tourist wholesale distribution business. Some people have 100% of their business involved in that. Others, like myself, have much less percentage. And we're feeling the pain.
Sure.
We know that it's not ever going to be acceptable for a 14-day quarantine to have tourists coming here. That's unreasonable, will never happen. We do believe we have to grab onto the hope that at some point, standards will be put in place that will allow tourists to come back under certain circumstances and situations. We're really, from my perspective, the business I'm involved in, we're not looking at tourists coming back this year in any numbers. We're trying to be hopeful for 2021. I'm just curious about the timeline and how you view that and what you think with the acceptable controls in place. Do you see this coming back in the next year or two? Or what's your thoughts? Thank you.
I think it's going to really depend on how quickly we're able to make medical progress. If I try to read papers from all over the world, if the Israelis and Germans are right, that together they will have a medication that within, say, 3 to 4 months will say, okay, you have COVID, we give you the medication, like you told me you have a headache, I give you the medication, and you're okay. Then I think you're going to see tourism coming back much more quickly. There's really two theories about tourism right now. One theory is people are saying people are just going to be scared to get on an airplane or a car or whatever it is, and they're going to just stay home. That's one theory. The other theory is people are really pent up. They're tired of being at home. They want to get out. They want to see the world again, and they're going to take those advantages. If you can assure people that, not you personally, we all can assure people that they can come and it's going to be medically safe. And I do not mean by safe that nothing will happen. It's just like you can't guarantee me that I'm going to go to Hawaii and I won't get a headache or I won't sneeze. That's insane. But if we can say, okay, look, this is a minor illness that we can control. like any of the other corona type viruses. You might have the flu for a day or two, but you know, you'll be okay. I think you're going to see tourism come back very quickly. One of the things, a major mistake we all made was having people just shelter in place. Gang, there's nothing that disinfects you better than the sun. You guys have a lot of sun. And fresh air is really good. And remember, one of the key elements that we're seeing that really helps people deal with this and building up immunity is vitamin D. Vitamin D is the cheapest vitamin in the world because you get it for free from the sun. So we have to figure out a way to allow people to be outside and yet social distance. You know, so what I call responsible being outside, and allow people to enjoy nature, which is really a way of doing it, without being pent up. If we can do creative thinking and creative medicine, I think we're going to see it'll be shorter than we had hoped for. If, on the other hand, we get into bureaucracy, we get into the idea that this is the paradigm and I'm not going to question it. And a lot of the people say you have to be shut up in the house. Those people claim to be using science, but they're not. And remember, there is never settled science. One of the easiest ways of knowing if someone knows science or not, the moment they say it's settled science, they don't know it. Because science is always the asking of questions and the challenging of existing paradigms. So we don't yet understand all of the properties of an aspirin. We know that in most cases, an aspirin will take away a headache, or a baby aspirin will lower your chance, and an older a man up to about 65 of a heart attack. It'll act as a blood thinner. But if you ask anyone to tell you all the properties of aspirin, we don't know it. We make a statistical guess. Medicine is part science and part art. So if we're able to take some risks, see the way things go, I think by 2021, we should be good to go. If, on the other hand, we get stuck in bureaucracy, we refuse to look at paradigms, then I think we have a long haul. That's the challenge that we all face. And maybe that's a good place to end. So I say thank you. I really want to thank you all. I'm looking forward to the next time I come to Hawaii and being out in the sun with you all. And I hope we'll all go out for dinner together on a Wednesday night, and we'll be able to have a big celebration. We can have a luau, except I don't eat pork. So if you can have a porkless luau, I'll be in great shape.
And Peter, you know, the bad news is I didn't want to tell you till the end. All our speakers actually get a free dinner.
Oh, except me.
So we owe you this, right?
You owe me a dinner. I'll tell you what, you can throw in the plane fare too, and I'm in great shape.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone. If you wanted to hear more from Peter, as I said, I'm working with Peter extensively on the tourism resilient program. We just actually announced today. Just sign up. It's free. It doesn't cost anything at rebuilding.travel. Rebuilding.travel. Specifically, the gentleman from Delta Airlines. We only have a gentleman from Etihad on our team. We would love to have you on there, and hopefully then we have one meeting every week. We don't expect you to attend everything, and we have projects we set up in regards how to help to relaunch tourism in the world. And in any ways, aloha to everyone, and thank you for doing this. And if we can do it again next month, just let me know, and I'd be happy to set it up for all of us.
Aloha, mahalo.
Okay, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jürgen.
Thank you.